What's up everybody, it's Rafi from ZURB and we got part 7 of our series on Flexbox. Now we've already covered so much. Last week we covered Foundation's Flexbox helper classes, which allow you to build your own custom UI right in your HTML. So this week we're going to take what we've already learned, put it all together, and make a few custom components together. It's going to be really exciting, so let's take a look. Alright, we have our first component that we're going to build. This is probably something similar to things that you'll see around the web. So we have an example here. Let me make that a little bit bigger. So what we have here is a typical product page where we have a product description on one side, maybe your feature image in the middle, and then some thumbs off to the left. Now as we scale things down to a medium screen, you're going to see that we're going to run out of space. So maybe we want to shift these thumbnail images underneath. Okay, so this is going to incorporate a couple different things. We're not going to build the right side here with the product description. That's pretty standard content. What we are going to focus on is the interaction between the main image and then the thumbs. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that would come together. So right here I have an example image. So I have this product image on the right, it's 900 pixels, and then I have my 4 other thumbnail images that are going to be vertically to the left. So let's go ahead and set that up. So if we look at the code over here, we have already set up kind of just the basics. So we have our grid container. Now this is just going to give us a maximum width to our grid items. So this is kind of a review if you missed that from before. We did that a couple lessons ago, so I'll have the link down below. But let's go ahead and jump into here. So we have our grid X, and then inside our grid X we have a cell with the class of shrink. So that's going to contain all the items on the left, which are our thumbnails. And then we have a cell with the class of auto, so this is going to grow to take up the remaining space, and that is housing our main product image. So let's go ahead and start to piece this together. Now it's going to move really fast, so go ahead and rewind it and see what I'm doing. I'm going to explain the different classes that I add here. I'm going to try to do everything as much as I can in Foundation classes, built-in classes. And then if I need to, we'll move into some SAS and do it there. So let's go ahead and scaffold this up. So first of all, we have our cell with the class of shrink. So now again, this is housing our vertical images. Now we can make this vertical using straight Flexbox properties, but we could also nest a grid in here. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to create a little bit of space so it's a little bit more readable. And I'm going to create a nested grid. Now in this case it's going to be a grid Y because we're going in the vertical direction. And now we're going to add our cells. Alright, so I'm going to add a cell with the class of shrink. Now the reason I'm adding the class of shrink on there is because I actually want the width of the cell to be the same width of the image. I don't want it to be wider. So you'll see that come to play here in just a moment. So we'll go ahead and remove all those extra images. We'll duplicate this, let's say 4 times. You can make it a little bit taller if we need to, but let's start with 4. Okay. So what we have already, as you can see here, is that we have a nested grid Y, and it has 4 images in it. So the 4 images are stacked vertically on top of each other. Now there's no spacing in between them, and the containers are all up against each other. So if we want them to space evenly, sort of like in this example here where there's a lot more spacing in between the images, let me grow that up there. So we're going to actually use flex properties to make that happen. So let's move that back out, and now let's go ahead and add our flex properties. So we can do this all through the grid classes. So we have a grid Y on here, and we learned before on the XY grid that you can use grid margin. So let's go ahead and do grid margin Y. And what this is going to do, if we save that, it's going to create the grid margin in between the items. Now that might be what you want to do, but if you actually want them spaced evenly inside of that vertical container, there's a better way to do that. So grid margin just creates the margin spacing in between the cells. So instead, let's go ahead and do something different. Let's use a spacing class. So now this is a vertical container, so we need to use our horizontal spacing classes because now that this container is turned vertically, those horizontal spacing classes will actually space our items vertically. So let's do that with align, and let's do align justify. So if we do align justify, nothing happens. So what we need to do is actually give this container a height. Right now, this container doesn't actually know how tall it's supposed to be, which is pretty common for vertical grid items. You want to actually, let's go ahead and grab this. So this grid Y right here, see, it's only the height of the items inside of it, but it actually needs to be the height of the container next to it. So we can easily do that. Let's go ahead and give this a class of product thumbs. Okay, and then we'll use this class. So I already created a Sass file here in case we needed to create any Sass styles or CSS styles. And we'll do product thumbs, and then we'll do height 100%. So that's just going to stretch that container out now to take up the entire height of the container that it's in. So if we do that, and now, there we go. It just took a little bit to update. So now everything is spaced out nicely. Cool. So we also want some horizontal spacing between these two sections. So let's go ahead and take care of that now. So we have the grid X, which is the parent of these two cells. So this cell, which is our left side with our product thumbs, and then this cell, which is the right side with our main image. Okay, so let's go ahead and add grid margin X. So we want that grid margin in the X direction. When I save it now, it creates that nice spacing that we're looking for. All right, cool. So far so good. We have our vertical thumbs set up there, and then we have our two independent sections. Now actually I like align spaced a little bit better on this. So instead of the images touching the top and the bottom, now they're spaced evenly from the very first one has the even amount of space to the next one, all the way down to the bottom. And so if we look back at our example, which I'll blow up for you, it fits a little bit more of that design that we're going for. Awesome. So now let's get tricky. So on different breakpoints, we're going to need to move this left side section down underneath. Okay, so these two cells that are now side by side need to stack on a medium screen because we're going to run out of space. So let's go ahead and make that happen. So we have our grid X and our grid margin X. Now there's not much I need to do there, but on the cells themselves we can create some sizing classes. So let's go ahead and create some sizing classes there. So on a medium and larger screen, I want this first cell to shrink. Okay, sorry, on a large screen and up, I want this first cell to shrink. So that's only going to be the width of the content inside of it. So let's do large dash shrink. Okay, now on a medium screen, I actually want this to take up the full width, so that way the two independent cells stack on top of each other. So now I'm going to make that medium 12. All right, so I'm going to pretty much do the same thing to the other cell that is containing the large preview image. I'm going to say medium 12 and then large dash auto. So now it's only going to be auto size on large, and the left side is only going to be shrink size on large. And then on a medium screen, they're both going to be 12 cells wide, and they're going to stack on top of each other. All right, so I did that. Now we're going to scale down to a medium screen, and this is what we get. All right, so we're not quite where we need to be, but we're getting there. So now we're going to drill down into this section up here, which is our product thumbs. Now it seems like they're stacked on top of each other, so if we look back at our code, that's because it wants to be a grid Y, which is a vertical grid. Okay, so on a medium screen, we actually need this now to be a horizontal grid. So what we're going to do is make this a grid Y on large. So large dash grid Y. And then we're going to say on mobile first. So it's mobile first. So starting from the small screen on up, it should be a grid X until it hits the large breakpoint, and then now it's going to be a grid Y. Okay, so now you could see that this container is actually going to span the full width of the page. It's actually wider than the main product image, so we can actually make that a little bit bigger just to cover all that extra space. There we go. So now we have sort of what we're going for, right? So we have our two sections, our two main cells stacked on top of each other. But the problem is we actually want, on the medium screen, we want the product thumbs to be underneath. Okay, so great. Now we have an ordering issue. So what we can do is use the ordering properties to accomplish this. So we have our left section, which is our product thumbs, and then our right section again, which is our main product image. And they need to stack on top of each other when we're on a medium or smaller screen. So if I scale this down, we can see what happens. So now we get to a medium screen, and you can see that now the two sections are indeed stacked on top of each other, which is what we're going for. But the problem is that the grid Y here that is containing these product thumbs is actually still a grid Y. So it still wants to be in the vertical orientation. So we need to actually switch that up so that it could be in the horizontal orientation. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is strip this back down to just a really simple setup. So we're not going to use the grid anymore for the product thumbs. We're just going to use straight Flexbox. So we'll go ahead and take the product thumbs wrapper class, and then we're only going to have our 4 images inside of that. So any element can be a flex child. So this actually simplifies our markup quite a bit, and now we can go into the CSS and actually build this the way that we'd like to. Okay, so we got our product thumbs class already in here, and so now we're going to go ahead and add some more CSS. So the first thing we want to do is make this display flex. Okay, so display flex is how we're going to be able to get these items to align horizontally next to each other, and then we're going to kind of set up the justify, the align justify. So what we do is we'll use the justify content property, and we're going to use space around because space around is what we were doing before with the CSS class. Okay, so it looks like that. Let's go ahead and bump up our image size so it fits the entire screen. There you go, that looks better. Okay, great. So now we have our product thumbs on top, and we have our main image on the bottom. So we want to actually flip those things and make this happen. So first of all, before we do that, let's make sure that we have all of our responsive adjustments done. Okay, so now we need to accommodate for a large and up size screen. So what we're going to do is add a media query in here. Actually, we can take this height and take that with us. So we'll do @include breakpoint. So this is using the Foundation breakpoint mixin, and we're going to pass in large over here. So at include breakpoint large. So the base classes or the base properties here are going to affect a small screen and larger. Now we're overriding some of the styles for a large screen and anything larger than that. So we'll add our height 100% in there. And then from there, we also want to do an alignment on these things. So we don't want these images to actually be stretched. So let's do align items, and we'll do align items flex start. All right. So once that updates, you can see that now they're not stretched. They're at the top. Okay, but now we need them all to be vertical. So this parent container can also be vertical if we do flex direction. Flex direction, and we're going to do column. So flex direction column will flip this now horizontally or vertically. Okay, great. So now we have the layout that we're looking for with just very little CSS. So if we go back to our medium screen, now we have the solution where these two things are stacked on top of each other. Back to a large screen, you could see that they're left and right aligned, which is great. So the last thing we need to do is on a medium screen, we need these things to actually flip order. So looking back at the medium screen, all right, I have the product thumbs on top and I have the main image on the bottom. So we can go hop back over to our HTML and we can actually address this there with some of Foundation's classes. So Flex utility classes, we talked about them last time, and we touched briefly on the ordering classes. So let's go ahead and use those. Okay, I'm going to use those on the cells that are wrapping these containers. So we have our cell that is wrapping the product thumbs. So let's go ahead and add an order class to this. Okay, so on a medium screen, I want this to be medium order 2. Okay, and that means that I'm going to jump down to this main product image, and I want this containing cell to be medium order 1. Okay, so if I save these, they should flip, and they do. All right, cool. So now let's go back out to a large screen, and we see that now they have indeed flipped, but now they've flipped for medium and larger. So now we need to override that for large. So we can easily do that with another class. Now, another way you could do that is you can reorder the markup, and maybe that's a little bit more confusing. So if you like to just have the markup in the order that you'd like to see it on a desktop screen or a larger screen, then you can just use the ordering classes. So then we'll do large order 1 for the first cell that is wrapping the product thumbs, and then we'll do large order 2 for the second one. Once we save that, now they're going to flip back in the correct orientation. And now when we scale down to a medium screen, you can see that they nicely stack on top of each other. And you know, we can also add some vertical spacing here really easily if we needed to. So that's totally something you can do. You can do like grid margin Y. Grid margin Y. Cool. So adding that, now we have nice even spacing. So really quickly and very little HTML and also very little CSS, we've created a responsive component using Flexbox. Now let's hop over to our second item. All right, so the next thing we're going to build is a comment section. So this is really common on a lot of websites. So we're going to build something like this. So I have a simple comment. I have an avatar here, an input, and then down below I have another avatar and now an actually populated comment. So pretty easy. Let's go ahead and build these out using just straight Flexbox. So I have my grid container here and my grid X. So this is just creating a content container to just keep everything within a max width. Okay, so you don't actually need this kind of setup, but this will just keep everything contained in the screen nicely. So let's go ahead and jump into making our comment section. All right, so we're gonna start with a comment section wrapper in case we need that. And then in here, we'll start building in the different pieces. So naming of these components is pretty important to keep them readable, so anybody that looks at this code knows what it's doing. So we'll start with a comment section wrapper, and then from there, we'll make our individual comments. So let's go ahead and create a little bit of spacing here. I like to space these elements out so it's a little bit more readable. All right, so now we're going to add a comment item. Okay, so comment item is actually where we're going to create our Flex containers and our Flex items. So up here, let's just go ahead and put some kind of header. So this is a smaller header on the page that says comments. Okay. So there we go. So we have comments, now we have our comment item. So inside the comment item, we're gonna have two basic things. So if we look back at our example here, we have an avatar on the left, and then on the right, we can either have an input or we can have an actual comment. And the comment could have a person's name and a date, and then the actual comment itself. So we need to kind of create a container that's generic enough to house those things. So let's go ahead and make that happen. So in the comment item, we're going to go ahead and put an avatar in here. Okay, so we got our little avatar, and then we're going to create a comment. So let's go ahead and create the comment. All right, so comment content, that could work as a class for our content. So the first one is going to start with an input. You can do an input type text, or if you want to allow longer comments, then you can do a text area. So text area comes with some extra styling. So just so you know that happens, you can set it up. So here we go. So what we have here is some really simple setup. So we have a comment item, which we're going to repeat as many times as we need. Now, in this case, only the first one is going to actually have an input, because the rest of them are just going to be a string of comments. Let's say like this is like a notepad or something that you would use in a website. So let's go ahead and remove these two other inputs, because later on we're going to put some different content in here. We're going to put like a username and some other things. So I'm just going to start with maybe like an H6, and this is going to be the name. Maybe we can even put the date in here. You can use the small tag in Foundation, and it shrinks down the size of the element that it's inside of. And it also gives a different styling to the text. So I'm just going to make up some dates. 8/8/2017. That's in the past. It already happened, so yeah, that works. So if I do this, you can see that it kind of gives some styling to that. But you can see that everything is like stacked on top of each other, and that's not what we're really going for. So we'll address that as well. And then in here, we'll just add some lorem for now, so you can see the comment. All right, cool. So I'm going to duplicate that for the next one. And for something like this, if you're prototyping really fast, you can actually use Foundation's Panini to make this happen even quicker. So if I didn't want to like copy and paste this a bunch of times, I can actually wrap this in a repeat. And let's do 5. Okay, so that's going to repeat it a bunch of times. Great. All right, so now we have our scaffolded setup, but we need to apply styles to this so it looks correct. So one thing I want to do is make sure that these images have a class. So let's give it class of comment avatar. All right, great. So now we'll hop into our CSS and we'll go ahead and finish this up. So we'll start with our comment section. And in our comment section, we actually don't have any specific styles that we need to put in right now, but this just sets up a wrapper for you to be able to style the components inside. What we are going to do is now target these specific comment items. So each individual comment is using a comment item class. So then we'll go ahead and use that. So comment item, we're going to make this display flex. This is the most simple thing that we need to do here. Okay. So we're making this display flex. Now everything is going to sit horizontally next to each other, which is great. So we have our image next to our input, and this is what we want it to do. So now we're going to set up the styles for the things inside of them. Now I wouldn't nest more than 3 levels deep, so we're already 2 here. If I started nesting another CSS class inside of that, it's probably not the best. So we're going to just keep it a little bit flatter. So the comment text, we'll actually keep it out here. So comment text is, sorry, comment content. This is the container that is wrapping the content on the right side. We're going to go ahead and give this a size. So the flex property will allow us to tell it to fill in the remaining space evenly, and that's what we want it to do. So let's go ahead and do that. So it's flex 1, 0, and 0. So and then just to make sure there's no cross-browser bugs, it's good to put 0px at the end of this one. So what this is going to do is use the flex property again to grow. It's going to tell this item that it needs to grow to the full width. Now when I did that, you can see that now the input that's inside of it is now full width, or filling the entire remaining space of the container. That's awesome. So now we're just going to do some quick simple things to make this even nicer. So one thing we know we're going to do is give some spacing between the image and the comment content. So let's go ahead and use the image class. So comment avatar. We're going to give this a border radius of 50%. That's going to make this a circle, and the most important thing is that we're going to add some margin right. So let's add 2 rem of margin right and kind of space these things apart from each other. Okay, so things are starting to look correct, but they're also not looking right just yet. So there's a couple things we need to address. Now I'm going to use the inspector to show you one of those things. Okay, so we have this image and this text area, and I ideally want them to line up vertically with each other. Now, one can be taller than the other, and that's okay, but they really do need to be vertically aligned, at least in the middle. So in this case, let's make that happen. The reason it's not happening by default is, well, there is some margin bottom on this input. And we haven't assigned any alignment properties to this. So let's go ahead and make that happen. So in the comment item, we're going to add the alignment property, align items, and then we're going to set that to center. Okay, so that's going to help. And what that's going to do is stop the images from stretching. They were trying to stretch to fill the height of the container next to it. Okay, that's the normal behavior of Flexbox. So if you want to override that, you set an alignment property to it. No problem. All right, now we need to clear the bottom margin on the input. So if we have comment content and we have an input, then we can do margin bottom 0. And this is pretty common with buttons and text and other things that you're trying to vertically center. You want to make sure you clear the margin bottom. So that's a little bit nicer. So now you can see that things are lining up a little bit better. I'm going to change this from align item center to flex start. Flex start in the normal sense will align this to the top of the container. And that's just going to look a little bit better for the comment sections. Okay, so that's great. Now I want to create a little bit of vertical spacing between these different comment items. So this is kind of a cool trick. You can use the plus method. So we'll do comment item, and then inside of that we'll nest comment item. So if comment item's next child is also comment item, so now we can add our margin top in here. So let's say margin top to rem, something like that. And now we're going to create that vertical spacing between each one of these. All right, this is already looking awesome. So there's not much else to do here, but just so you could see some of these elements, I'll review it real quick. So what we did was we created a item, this comment item, which is display flex. We added an alignment, align items property to it, so it vertically aligns these both to the top using flex start. Okay, and then from there, we also made sure that our comment content, which is what's wrapping this like text or this input here, grows to fill the available remaining space. And so that's using the flex property. We set that to flex 0 and 0. Okay, and from there we just made sure that we cleared any margin bottoms on things, just to make sure that when you're vertically aligning them, that the margin bottom is not affecting it, because it is taken into account when you're vertically aligning things. Cool, so we just created a really quick and simple comment section that you can use with vanilla Flexbox. All right, we're ready for the third thing we're gonna build, which is going to actually incorporate a lot of the different Flexbox properties that we've talked about before into one component. So what we're gonna build is this appointment reminder layout here, where we have these specific cards. There's one section on the left and one section on the right here that display specific reminders in this kind of a card-like format. So we're going to go ahead and build that, and I'll show you some of the different properties that you can use. So if we look over at our code, we're going to start again with our grid container. We're going to keep this thing in a max width, and we're going to use our grid to separate the two sides that we create. So we have a div with the class of cell auto and div with a class of cell auto. So both of those two sides are going to be the same size and then fill the entire width of that container. So I'm going to move kind of quickly here. So we're going to build out the HTML. We're just going to do this in like a scaffold type format. So I'm going to scaffold out the HTML that we need to make this happen. So we're going to call this a reminder section. All right, so we're going to build our reminder section here. So we have our reminder section parent class, and that's going to be the entire left or right section that we're going to have our individual cards in. So we have our reminder section, that's the parent class. Now we're going to create some cards in there. So we're going to call them reminder cards. So now we've built our reminder card. Now we're going to put some content into those. So we'll drop an image in there, and that's going to be an icon. And then we need just one more wrapper for our content. So we're going to call that reminder card content. Okay, so before I go any further, let's just recap what we have here. We have a reminder section, which is going to be the parent container around our cards. So each section will have 3 cards. Then we have our reminder cards. So that's the cards themselves that are inside of that container. And the first one has an image and some content. So what we're doing is just scaffolding out what goes in there. So let's go ahead and do the next thing. So we're going to do a paragraph tag with the class of stat. Stat is a built-in class in Foundation to create a larger number. So let's just say 325. And then from there, we're going to do total reminders. So we'll do another paragraph tag. Let's put a small tag in here. Small tag is another style tag in Foundation that will just shrink down the text and maybe give it a different style. So we could do total reminders. And you can use a span tag instead, but small tag, if you're just scaffolding, automatically styles it a little bit smaller. Cool. So far you can see some content on the page. We're going to go ahead and copy this. So we're going to have 3 cards. So 3 cards in the reminder section. All right. Now the second and third card, again, they don't have an image icon. So we're going to get rid of those. So it's just going to be a reminder card. And actually that should be not plural. So let's just call it reminder card. There we go. And then inside of that, we have either an icon or just reminder card content. Okay, so far we have something scaffolded up that we could start to make look like what we're trying to create. Now we have 2 cells to fill with this content. So let's go ahead and copy this and we'll paste this into our second cell. There we go. So now we have it on both sides. And they're going to be pretty similar structure. The content's just going to be different. So it's okay right now for scaffolding that they both have the same content. Now we'll hop over into the CSS and we'll make this actually look like what we're going for. So I've already set up some of these classes that we're using. And we'll go ahead and set these up. So reminder card image, we need to add that to our images. So we can go ahead and do that. And add those classes there, reminder card image. Okay, so now the image is round and it's set to a size of 65 pixels, which we already did that in the placeholder image, but the CSS actually makes that happen when you put real images in there. All right, so the reminder card image has a margin right, so it's going to push the content over to the right by 1 rem, but they're not even sitting next to each other right now. So let's make all of that happen. So first of all, we need to make the reminder section display flex. So that's going to mean all the cards will sit next to each other horizontally. And we just need that one property and value to make that happen. So now you can see that they're sitting next to each other, but they're all jammed up against each other. And you see that inside the card, the image is stacked on top of the content, which we don't want. So we're also going to make the reminder card itself display flex. So that's going to make the image and the content container sit next to each other. There you go. So that looks pretty good so far. So now we're going to start to get a little bit more involved in some of the specific spacing and styling that we need. So we want these reminder cards to be the same width and take up the remaining space that's in the container. Right now they're all auto size, so they're just sitting off to the left and jammed up against each other. So we're going to counteract that by making the reminder card grow. So again, in the earlier lessons here, we talked about how to make something grow. So we do flex 0, 0. Let's put pixels on the end so it works on every browser. And what we get now is that these items are going to evenly space each other. So each one of these containers is the exact same size, and they're spaced apart from each other. So if I actually inspect this, you can see that that one is 189 pixels, that one's 189 pixels, and that one is 189 pixels. So each card is the exact same width. Now, that's pretty good, and that's going to get us started, but that's not exactly what we're doing in the design. Especially when we add some padding in here, you're going to see that. So let's do that. So padding 1.5 rem. And misspelled that. So there we go. Not 15 rem, 1.5. There we go. 15 rem is quite a bit. 1.5 is a lot better. There we go. Okay, so you can start to see this coming together. So what we need to do now is to make sure that everything is aligned vertically, and then we also need to create some spacing for the first card. So how would we align something vertically? Well, we'll use the align items property. So we'll go ahead and add align items to the reminder section. It's going to make sure that each of the cards is aligned vertically. Now, if we do that there, it's going to make the cards, each card, only the height of the content inside of it. So actually we don't want to do that because we want each card to be the entire height of the container. Again, if we look back at our example that we're building, each one of these cards is the height of the parent container, which in our case is the reminder section. So let's go ahead and put that somewhere else. So in the reminder card itself is where we're going to apply the alignment. So we're going to do align items center. All right, now you can see that that's going to vertically align all these pieces in the center. They don't look exactly centered, and there's a lot of spacing gaps. The reason for that is that these elements might have margin bottom. So it's normal for a paragraph tag or an input or buttons to have margin bottom because in a normal document they need to space themselves away when they're stacked on top of different pieces of content. In a situation where you want to vertically align something, that's probably not what you want. So what we could do is set a simple reset. So on all the paragraph tags, we're going to say margin bottom 0. So doing that resets the margin bottom. You're going to see that now these sections are aligned a little bit nicer together, and they are exactly vertically centered. So pretty cool. So we're almost there even. Now we're just going to create some final styles to set up these cards apart from each other. Now, the two cards with just straight data are going to have a gray background. So let's do background. And then we'll use the foundation variable light gray. Okay. So if we do that, you're going to see that all the cards are going to get this light gray background. Now, we know that from the design that we're going for, the first card actually has a white background. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, there's two ways to do this. You can actually go into your HTML and then give this first card a specific class, like first or reminder card main, something like that. Or you could just do this in CSS. If you know that the first card will always have the same style, you could safely do that in your CSS. So we could do something like this, where we go and first child. And I like doing this, especially if I know that this is going to work across the board, especially if this is a reusable component I'm going to use somewhere else. That if I do it in the CSS, now I don't have to have other team members remember if they're creating this component somewhere else, that they have to have that specific class on the first card. It's already taken care of in the CSS styles. So we're going to give this one a background And we'll use the foundation variable of white. So now it's going to differentiate it just a little bit. Now, one thing we noticed from the design, now it's very slight, so let's take a look at it. The first card that is white actually is a little bit wider than the other two cards, and that's on purpose because obviously if the first card has an icon in it, it needs to be a little bit wider. Now, there's a couple ways that we can achieve this. We're going to do it the Flexbox way. Again, there's going to be a fallback as well to make sure that this works for every different browser. So let's do that. So in the first child, we're going to set this width. So we'll do flex. Now we want this to be, again, a growing container. So we'll do 1, 0, 0, or 1, 0, and then now we're going to set the flex basis. So flex basis is like a minimum width where we're going to actually put in a specific width. Now we could do a pixel width or a percentage width. I'm going to go ahead and do a percentage width. So we're going to do like 60%. Okay, so if I do that, you could see that now this first card takes up 60% of the width of the entire container. The other two are splitting their width evenly. Now 60% is pretty aggressive, and I don't think it matches the design, so we're going to dial that back to 40%. And then we can dial it back to 30%. I'm just kind of winging it here just to see what works the best. So it might actually be like 28%, something like that. So it only needed to be slightly bigger than the other two. Okay, so we're getting pretty close here. So just one note on this to be cross-browser compatible. With Flex Basis and Internet Explorer, it likes to have a min width as well as like a fallback. So we'll put a min width on that. There we go, min width 28%. So now it's matching and it's cross-browser compatible. Great. So from here, we're almost done. There's just some small styling tweaks, but you could see that all the flex properties have been applied, and we can create this type of component that is repeatable and usable in many different situations. All right, so now you know how to build some really cool components using Flexbox. So you know how to use Foundation Flexbox helper classes and the Foundation XY grid. Now, if you want a deep dive on everything in Foundation, including Foundation's components and JavaScript, make sure you check out our Foundation training courses. I'll put a link below. Now, next week, we're gonna hop right into a SAS series. So if you ever wanted to learn SAS, don't miss this. Make sure you hit subscribe up above. That way the Yeti gets a bag of sour gummy bears. All right, we'll see you next week.